Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Today is April 19th, 2024, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, unfortunately, today the Russians conducted another terrorist attack on the city of Dnipro. And not too long ago as well, about an hour ago, the Russians also struck Odessa. But with the attack on Dnipro, I guess the silver lining behind this is the Ukrainians managed to destroy for the very first time a Russian long-range bomber, the TU-22M3, a very prized bomber. The value is around $40 million, and it's confirmed that one pilot died as a result of this destruction of this bomber. And it's been confirmed by Budanov a few hours ago that this was a Ukraine S-200 air defense system, which shut it down over the territory of Russia, most likely as it was coming back, or as it was actually flying towards Ukraine, I should say. So they managed to deter at the very least one bomber that was about to release all of its missiles to then attack the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. So this is, I guess, the silver lining behind this. And we know that not only have the Russians lost a very prized bomber, but this is one of these bombers that I don't believe the Russians are able to build anymore. They don't have the supply chain, the technology, the industry capable to build new planes such as the TU-22M3, and the same thing with the A-50s. And Budanov confirmed that the S-200 air defense system that was used for this strike was also involved in the destruction of the A-50, the very last one that was destroyed over the Sea of Azov. So it shows that the Ukrainians are still able to find very innovative ways of destroying Russian planes despite the severe lack of air defense systems, which Ukraine is desperately waiting for right now. And the Russians are not safe anymore. This will deter the Russians from utilizing these planes very often because they don't have many of them. And because they're also losing crew, well, one pilot died at the very least here, it's not like they can train them within a few weeks. We know that if we compare it with the Ukrainian pilots training for F-16s, it takes a while. And so you can't just rush through this process. Of course, the Russians will because they're desperate, but the quality of the pilots will be greatly reduced as a consequence, and it already has. So this is all really good news in the sense that Ukraine is still able to find different ways to defend its sky. And, you know, I think that the Ukrainians absolutely need to continue striking Russian airfields as well with their long-range drones, especially the airfields that have these strategic bombers and long-range bombers like the TU-22M3, the TU-95s. It's absolutely crucial because right now the Russians are utilizing these very heavy planes that can carry a lot of payload and big missiles that have a lot of destructive power to conduct their terrorist operations in Ukraine. So somehow the Russians think that their terrorist operations will convince the Ukrainians to stop fighting, except it has a complete opposite effect. It only convinces the Ukrainians that they need to continue fighting because otherwise the Russians will commit massive genocide in Ukraine if they win. So this is the silver lining, and hopefully we will see more of these TU-22M3s and other planes being shut down as the Ukrainians, by the end of the summer, will receive the bulk of the promised F-16s, and I really can't wait to see them in action. Now, in other news as well, speaking of long-range drones that the Ukrainians are developing, The Economist confirms that the Ukrainians have now started producing new models of long-range drones that can travel up to 3,000 kilometers. This is a huge development, and it's really showing how this drone program that the Ukrainians have heavily invested in is really paying off. And truly, as I said previously, this is one of the, I guess, spaces or environments where the Ukrainians have full control over. Drones are cheap, easy to produce, relatively low cost, and doesn't take a lot of time either to make them. And they have really made a huge difference. We've seen how in the last few months, the Ukrainians have been striking Russian oil refineries, and it's really made the Kremlin panic to the point that they're now asking Kazakhstan, Belarus to step in if they're going to be in need of refined fuels. So this is really hurting the Russians right now. And to see that now the Ukrainians have the ability to strike Russia within the range of 3,000 kilometers is a really, really big development. Let's not also forget that the Ukrainians have bet a lot on AI, artificial intelligence, that now you don't even need to be guiding these drones like manually. You just set a target and guidance will take care of itself. The AI will find the target in which he needs, or the AI needs to lock on for. So this is really, really excellent news. And basically this means that Ukraine can reach Siberia. And again, most of the Russian refineries, critical infrastructure is within the European side of Russia. So pretty much the Ukrainians will be able to destroy, if they can mass produce them in the next few weeks or months, destroy everything that is critical for the war effort in Ukraine for the Russians. So this is excellent news, and it's really paid off. This program, you really need to give credit to the Ukrainians. And it obviously, one of the big issues for the Russians, it creates dilemmas, because now we've seen that they are not prioritizing their defenses of Russia, because of course they need to defend their military in Ukraine. And so they have all these holes in Russia, and the Ukrainians are just simply able to penetrate left and right, whether it be in the north, in the south, in central Russia, and Siberia. We've seen the Ukrainian drones fly all the way up to Tatarstan and even Mordovia. A few days ago, the Ukrainians managed to fly a drone. Now, the extent of the damage is unknown, towards essentially a nuclear deterrent facility. It was a radar system that was supposed to detect missiles incoming from the west. So it's basically part of the Russian nuclear deterrent program. And the Ukrainians managed to just fly through and, based on some reports, damage that facility itself. So that is a huge development as well, because we've heard in the past that the Russians have been saying that if you hit, if you hit Russia, or if you hit even one of our infrastructure that is meant for nuclear deterrence or nuclear strike capabilities, that's a red line. Well, clearly the Russians are bluffing. So it's really important that the Ukrainians continue unraveling the Russians in terms of their, fake claims that, there's always red lines on everything. So that's the only thing that the Russians have, is their nuclear weapons that they can dangle once in a while to say, hey, we have them, and if this happens, then we're going to use them for sure. And the Ukrainians are constantly, unraveling this myth in front of the world. So it's really important that the Ukrainians continue hitting and striking Russian facilities, whether they be refineries, oil depots, airfields, etc. The Ukrainians need to continue doing this. And this drone, that is part of many that the Ukrainians have developed, will help. Last but not least, you guys know, a few days ago, I passed on the good news that US Congress will be voting for this massive military assistance bill worth $60 billion. Now, most of it will stay in the United States, which is excellent news as well for my American viewers, because this will go directly to the American economy, and about $28.5 billion will go toward Ukraine and rearming the Ukrainian military and finding new contracts for the Ukrainian military. So it's good news, right? 30 billion is a very large amount, and the Ukrainians have shown that they're able to really maximize the efficacy of all the money that's being invested into their military. So the good news today is that the bill has been adopted today. So now it will have to be voted tomorrow, Saturday, April 20th. So it's a very important day. Mark it on your calendars. I will, and I will be following this very closely. And I'm very optimistic that it will pass. I know it's not a done deal. We have to wait, and we have to, until it's going to be signed and by, President Biden, we still have to be very careful, but I'm very optimistic nonetheless. And this will really be crucial for Ukraine next few weeks, because we know that the Russians are, we've been talking about the possible Russian counteroffensive or offensive in the summer. So the Ukrainians absolutely need this injection of assistance to be able to defend. And that's what Russia's been counting on the last few months. They really were betting and literally buying off, most likely, certain politicians and journalists to spread misinformation, to tell the world that, look, the United States isn't willing to help Ukraine anymore, and Ukraine is going to be abandoned. They might as well just give up. You have useful idiots like Elon Musk and others that have been pretty much voicing the same narratives. And really, I think that's all thanks to you guys. Our public pressure really helped here. And I think that Mike Johnson just really had no choice. There was too much pressure on him. And you don't do a 180 like that without being confident that you will, this aid will be passed. So I think that this time is the good one, better late than ever. And don't forget as well, I think part of that is not just the public pressure, but the defense lobbyists. The defense industry is one of the most profitable industries in the United States. You think these CEOs and leaders in these companies are just going to sit idle and not try to convince the US Congress to pass this? This is a big deal for them. They're going to make a lot of money. And the best thing as well is that it's a win-win situation for the American people. The money is going to be reinvested back into the United States, making the American military even stronger by giving up some old stockpiles of weaponry to Ukraine and remodernizing the American military. So this is a huge win for the United States. So I am very optimistic for tomorrow. And, this is really going to be a game changer for the Ukrainians. We know that the Russians back in 2022 make huge gains in the springtime, but they found themselves to be too weak at the end of the year because they just didn't have enough forces to defend those territories. And if Ukraine will receive all the promised weapons in the next few months, I think we could face a similar situation. Now, it will be more long-term. It won't be in a matter of few months. But within a year or two of fighting, the Ukrainians, if they receive a constant flow of support from its allies, could weaken the Russians to such a point that that's what would allow the Ukrainians to drive out the Russians, is not concentration of firepower, but just the sheer fact that the Russians don't have enough men and, most important, vehicles and air superiority. Now the Ukrainians have most of the pieces together and they know what it will take to beat the Russians. The Russians have adapted. The Russians have learned from 2022. And, that was the main problem in last year's counteroffensives, that the Ukrainians and its allies and all of us expected that the Russians just wouldn't learn and they would just simply, continue fighting the same way they did in the early phase of 2022, which wasn't the case. They built very dense defense lines. They doubled down on mobilizing hundreds of thousands of men. And, they've proven that they simply don't care about human lives. So that's what really helped them manage to hold the line last year and also doing their offensives this year, right? And of course, we've seen that Ukraine wasn't able to really hold on to their defenses because of that lack of support from its allies. So if all things are kept constant as of, tomorrow, and the United States and other allies start really helping the Ukrainians with all the resources that they have or within their capacity, it's really going to make a huge difference for the Ukrainians in the next few years. Because I don't think now it's a question of a few months. It's probably going to be still in the long term. I think that most specialists have been reading a lot of reports and videos discussing how much more the Russians can continue on fighting in Ukraine, and the consensus, the majority of people agree that it's 2 years left. So 2 years as of February of this year. So somewhere around February of 2026, in early 2026, we should start seeing the Russians being extremely weak, and likely to hear Putin and Shoigu and all the other, Lavrov, Peskov, start talking that they need a ceasefire, that they need a peace. So I think that we should be expecting this, but this aid absolutely needs to pass, and I'm extremely optimistic that it will. You can see that US Congress voted in favor. 316 members voted in favor to have this vote tomorrow. So this is very good news. So that is the video for today, guys. I hope you enjoy my update. I'm really thankful for your support of this channel. Again, if you have any money that you want to donate to the Ukrainian, whether it be humanitarian aid or to the Ukraine military, please do so. The Ukrainians need your help, and you can see that we can make a difference. So thank you again, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!